everyone. My name is Marite. I'm here from Latvia, and I work for Swedbank, which is the largest bank in Sweden and the Baltic countries, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. And what I want to share is our story of how a bank that is as old and complicated as ours has managed to become really digital and innovative. And to kick off, just a little bit about the bank itself. Swedbank was founded over 200 years ago in Sweden with the goal to help fight poverty and teach people to save for a better future. Sounds quite good, right? At the moment, the bank has grown. We have 7 million private customers and 600,000 corporate customers. So if you think about the bank of this size, of course, to serve all of these customers, automation and digitalization are really key. And a little bit about our digitalization story. On the slide behind me, you can see how customer habits have evolved. So we started at a point where, internet banking became a thing. And then very quickly, we see that mobile actually is surpassing internet banking and keeps growing and growing exponentially. And if you ask me about, well, how will we bank in the future? A couple of trends that we see actually from our markets already are that, first of all, we'll be asking Siri to make a payment to the electricity bill or whatever. So we'll be using IoT or audio devices, sound recognition, speech recognition. And we also see that third-party integrations will increase, which means that people will log into the bank not from the banking application, but through some type of other fintech that they like more. This is specifically topical in Europe, where we have different types of legislations that enable it. Overall, if we look at banks and fintech companies, they want to work with each other, at least as far as I know. They have things that they envy about each other. So, for example, banks are really envious of the innovation and speed and low cost that fintech companies can provide to their customers and how easily they attract the digitally savvy customer. However, on the other side, we have the banks, which have large customer bases historically, customer trust, and they know regulations of all shapes and sizes, which is really complicated sometimes for fintech companies. So if there are two parties that are seemingly so interested in each other, why are the levels of collaboration not much greater? Well, there's two sides to the story here. From one side, we have the banks, which would like to find fintechs to collaborate with, but it's hard to do with weak innovation cultures, scattered organizations, and IT systems from somewhere between the 1970s. And fintechs are really good with speed and cost. However, they have no clue what the belly of the beast or back office of a bank looks like. So working together for these two parties becomes increasingly complicated. It's time-consuming and expensive. However, there is something that I want to say on behalf of the banks. They haven't had an easy time in history. And to kind of illustrate that, how far we're going when we're talking about banking, there's 3 random objects behind me. You're all out of lunch, so let's play some history trivia. So first we have the hot air balloon. It was invented by the Montgolfier brothers in the 17th century when it first took flight. Next up, there was a gentleman, he was actually a Benedictine monk called Dom Perignon. And his job was to ferment wine, as religious people do in their basements. And he was trying to ferment white wine, and it kept showing up with bubbles. So one day, frustrated, he tasted his failed experiment. And then he exclaimed, "Come quick, I think I've tasted the stars." And thus, champagne was born. And last but not least is a guy named John Montagu, who was the 4th Earl of the county of Sandwich. It's a real place. You can look it up. And this guy was a statesman, but also a notorious gambler. He loved gambling so much that one night he didn't even want to leave the gambling table to have supper. So he asked his staff to put his steak between 2 slices of bread so that he can keep playing cards and still eat his supper without getting grease on them. And thus the sandwich was born. Now, why am I sharing these 3 examples? Obviously, I want you to know that I am amazing at Googling random stuff. But more than that, I want to compare these 3 things to a bank in Italy. I will not try to pronounce the name of it. There's always one Italian in the audience shaking his head. But this is the oldest bank in the world that is still in operations today. So this bank has been working since before you could enjoy champagne, have a sandwich, or take a flight in a hot air balloon. And if we go back to the time when it was like its first origins in the 14th century, these guys have been in business since before we had flushing toilets. I mean, the same exact bank, and it's one of the four largest banks in Italy today. So when you have that much of baggage, you can imagine why it's really hard to innovate in an organization. So those are hard wheels to get turning with such amounts of legacy. But how to succeed? That's the big question. Am I here to paint a very depressing picture for you? Absolutely not. I know that there are ways that any company, not even a bank, can move into the future. And Swedbank, at its 200 years compared to this bank, is a mere baby. Yet, we have found ways to move into a digital era with our customers. And for us, that comes in 4 different sections. So there's 4 ways we work with innovation. One of them is internal innovation, the other one is open banking, the third is partnerships and investments, and last but not least, it is community, which is one of the things that I strongly work with. And you can think of these as 4 wheels of a car. If one of them breaks down, the whole car stops going forward at the rate it should be. And I'll go deeper into each of them. So first of all, internal innovation. Now, nobody knows you as well as you know yourself. So starting from your own organization and how you work and how you create new solutions is probably the most important thing. But it's also the most time-consuming and probably the most expensive one to tackle. However, there's different projects that you can do. We have 3 that I really like at Swedbank. One is called the Swedbank Academy. Since we have so many courses of trainings to do for employees, starting with anti-money laundering courses that every single person of our 1,700 employees has to take, and ending with a course on mindfulness or meditation for personal use. So we have a huge array of courses in this Swedbank Academy, and it has online courses and offline courses and offers employees to keep learning throughout their career, especially today when you think about all the jobs that are changing and are going to change because of the new technologies. You don't want to lose people just because their knowledge is outdated. Ideally, you simply improve their knowledge base. So this is what we do with that. Then the other thing is digital sprints or design thinking. So this is something like of a service that we create for different departments. We go in, we figure out what their problem is, and then we apply different new methods of thinking or of working to help them tackle it in a new way. And last but not least, which I really like, is an idea bank. It's basically an online platform. You can imagine it looks something like Facebook. Anyone can type in the idea they have, how to improve the company. It can be anything starting with, we should have better descriptions on this product, and ending with, I think we need a second microwave in the kitchen. So it can be any type of idea, and then ideas are liked or disliked or commented, and then moved along with the different project managers that manage them. And this helps us in the way that normally when you have a team, you don't think to ask the guy in the front office who's actually dealing with the customer for, hey, what we should do with this product. This allows any employee, any place in the organization to speak up, and if there's enough people that agree, then those changes are implemented. Now, after internal innovation, there's open banking. Just to get a feeling, how many of you have heard of open banking as a term? Okay, quite a few. So this is probably a bit more popular now in Europe, like the EU, where there's a new type of legislation called PSD2, which allows, in very simple terms, the fintech companies to plug into the banks as easily as you would plug in your iPhone into the charger. Well, it's a bit more complicated than that, but let's imagine it's so beautiful and easy. And what this allows you as a customer is you can go to a fintech application and say, hey, this solution is really awesome. I want to give them my bank data so they can do something cool with it. And I don't mind that they do it. So this allows you to choose actually where your financial data is going. Banks are not keeping it just to themselves anymore. And this means for the banks, since it's so easy to plug in, that there's going to be more and more and more solutions added to the network of companies that you can work with. And in Swedbank, we already have 3,000, even over 3,000 developers on board and working on this platform. And the next area where we innovate is partnerships and investments. So this is when we go into more complex projects. So for example, one that I really love, I'll give an example just to share something that is more tangible than the abstract things that I talk about. So we have partnered with a company called Mina Technologies. So what they do is if you go into the bank application, they scroll through all of your payment data, everything that you purchase, everything that you pay for, and they find reoccurring payments. So they will see that, hey, you pay for your Spotify bill every month, you pay for a gym membership, you pay for an electricity bill. So that's pretty cool. So in one place you see everything that you're paying for all the time, and you can be like, hey, you know what, I haven't been to the gym in 6 months, I could cancel my gym membership. But you all probably know how hard it is to cancel something, especially if it's with like a electric company or governmental institution. So what this app also does is that with one click inside that app, you can either cancel or change the service right there. You don't have to go anywhere else. They take care of all of it in the back end for you. And collectively, over 2 or 3 years, this application has saved our customers over €500,000. And it's also one of the most loved features in our bank. So how to get into a partnership with a bank, how to get invested in a bank. We'll actually have a panel about this later. But what I have to say is that when fintechs approach us, well, it's a two-way street. For us, when we meet fintech companies, there needs to be a clear strategic value or match from us and from the fintech company. There also needs to be a way to increase customer satisfaction, like it is with this application that I just mentioned. Or there needs to be a way to create new business models. As we see, banking is going into many different directions now, beyond even what you would typically consider that a bank does. And last but not least is our community efforts. Now, as I mentioned with the company, with this app before, sometimes it can be really hard to get to this collaboration. It takes a lot of time, it's a complicated process, and we can't just collaborate with any company. However, there's amazing ways for us to discover new talent across Europe, and that is through acceleration programs. We actually have partnered with Startup Wise guys on 2 accelerator programs focusing on fintechs now. Now we're running the 3rd one, and it has been a great way not only to follow new ideas and see how they develop and help them through mentorship and giving them workspaces, but it's also a great asset to our company in building our internal innovation culture, because when employees go in as mentors and meet startups, they're also challenged by how these new companies think about the products and areas they've been working in for so long. So this is one of the efforts of what we show to our show to the community. And that is a very important aspect for us, because when when you look at fintechs, and there's an abundance of them in Europe, we want them to approach us and think of us as the first bank that they want to talk to. So we want to be interesting for them. We want to be visible. And we do that through programs like this and through different initiatives. One of the main ones that we do now is co-working spaces. We run 2 co-working spaces, one in Riga and one in Vilnius. And host fintechs there. We host events there, help with mentorship. And they've been so successful that I think in the next few years we'll be opening some more spaces like this. Now, that's a bit about Swedbank from our perspective, how we've done things. And of course, it hasn't happened overnight and it hasn't been all shiny and successful. I think if I hadn't worked for the bank as long as I have, I'd look a lot younger right now. But of course, there's still ways, through trial and error, we've learned a lot of things. So to quickly summarize, I think that there's 3 steps to success, especially in the banking area, but I think in any area in general. One of them is integrating innovation. So as I mentioned, all of the internal innovation initiatives, well, this type of thing doesn't happen if your management isn't on board. If there's just one soldier fighting the innovation fight in the organization, that's probably the worst job in the company. And the other thing that I think is important is also how you handle the processes of how you work with fintech companies. So if you're going to a meeting that you know that, listen, our integration process usually takes 4 months, it will go through steps like so and so, and you don't go in there not knowing what you want to offer, because the startup community is quite small and gossipy, and you don't want to gain a bad reputation as an organization early on, because it will become so much harder attracting potential partners in the long haul. And last but not least, tapping into the ecosystem. So, large organizations can decide to be really big, fat cats, knowing everything. We go in and we say, you guys, now we are in the ecosystem, now we got this, we're going to do this and this and that. Well, that really doesn't work out very well. What we did when we started entering the startup ecosystems in the markets we work in, we went in very humbly and asked, guys, what is it that you need? How can we help? And through those discussions with various stakeholders in the industry, that saved us a lot of time and money creating activities that nobody actually cared about. So we didn't go in trying to know it all. We went in trying to see how we can help. So that's why in some markets we have these co-working spaces, and others we run informative events or support conferences, whatever the local ecosystem needs. And that has helped us become a player in those fields. And I see my time is running out, and I want to finish with a quote from the 90s by Bill Gates. And it is, banking is necessary, banks are not. And banking is truly a utility business. You go to the bank, you go to the dentist, same thing. Neither of those things is absolutely pleasurable. And when Bill Gates said this in the 90s, it left most bankers indifferent, some of them shocked and outraged. But this statement is proving to be more and more true with every day today. As we see all these new fintech companies coming into the space, we see that maybe bank isn't the only way to actually manage your finances. So what I can say is that banking is going through somewhat of a perfect storm right now. The same way that Airbnb and Booking.com changed the travel industry, or Uber or Bolt changed the transportation industry. After these big shifts, us as customers got a lot more decent services that help us in our everyday lives. They're more intuitive and more price competitive. So at the end of the day, I can be talking about fintechs and banks for quite some time. But the most important thing and the most important aspect in the core of all this is us as the customers. And I think that no matter who wins in this race between banks and fintechs, collaboration should be the key, in my opinion. But at the end of the day, we can all have a glass of champagne, eat a sandwich on a hot air balloon, and make a toast to seamless financial services for the future. Thank you.